You know, the concept of generational curses is one that has always fascinated me. Growing up, I would hear stories about how certain patterns of behavior or struggles seem to repeat themselves in families, almost as if they were passed down like a legacy. And it wasn't just physical traits or habits. We're talking about deep-seated emotional and spiritual struggles that seem to linger for generations. As I got older, I began to realize just how relevant this concept is in modern society. We're living in a world where people are more aware than ever of the importance of mental health, self-care, and personal growth. And yet many of us still struggle to break free from the shackles of our family's past. We feel trapped by patterns of behavior that we can't seem to shake, or burdened by the weight of secrets and shame that have been hidden for far too long. But what if I told you that there's hope? What if there's a way to break free from the cycles of pain and suffering that have plagued your family for generations? That's what I want to explore with you today, as we delve into the concept of generational curses and explore what the Bible has to say about them. When we think about generational curses, we often think about the negative patterns that get passed down from one generation to the next. We think about the addictions, the abuse, the lies, and the shame that seem to haunt our families for years on end. But what about the emotional and spiritual challenges that come with these patterns? How do they affect our relationships, our self-esteem, and our very sense of identity? For many of us, growing up with generational curses can feel like walking on eggshells. We never know when the other shoe is going to drop or when the next crisis is going to hit. We're constantly on edge, trying to avoid the landmines that our family members have laid for us. And it's exhausting, to say the least. The emotional toll of generational curses cannot be overstated. We're talking about feelings of guilt, shame, and anxiety that can be so overwhelming, they're almost palpable. We feel like we're drowning in a sea of negativity, with no lifeline in sight. And the worst part is, we often feel like we're alone in this struggle. But here's the thing, we're not alone. Millions of people around the world are struggling to break free from the shackles of their family's past. And it's time we started talking about it. It's time we started sharing our stories and seeking help and support from those who understand what we're going through. When we're dealing with generational curses, it's easy to feel like we're stuck in a rut. We feel like we're repeating the same patterns over and over again, without any hope of escape. But the truth is, we have the power to break free. We have the power to choose a different path, to create a new legacy for our families. So how do generational curses manifest in families? Well, it can be anything from addiction to abuse, from anxiety to depression. It can be a pattern of self-sabotage or a cycle of codependency. It can be a family secret that's been hidden for years, or a legacy of shame that's been passed down from generation to generation. The manifestations are endless, but the root cause is often the same: a broken relationship with God and a lack of understanding about how He works in our lives. You see, when we don't have a clear understanding of God's sovereignty, His love, and His power, it's easy to get stuck in these patterns. We feel like we're on our own, fighting against the forces of darkness without any hope of victory. But that's simply not true. With God on our side, we have the power to break free from any curse, no matter how entrenched it may be. We have the power to create a new legacy, one that's built on love, forgiveness, and redemption. So let's talk about the biblical origins of generational curses. Where do they come from, and what does the Bible say about them? Well, the concept of generational curses is rooted in the book of Exodus, where we're told that God visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the third and fourth generation. This idea is repeated throughout the Old Testament, where we see stories of families struggling with the consequences of their ancestors' actions. We see it in the story of Abraham, who was promised a great legacy, but struggled with the sin of his father, Terah. We see it in the story of David, who had to deal with the consequences of his own sin, as well as the sin of his ancestors. But here's the thing. The Bible doesn't just talk about the negative consequences of generational curses. It also talks about the power of redemption and the hope of breaking free from these patterns. We see it in the story of Jesus, who came to set us free from the power of sin and death. We see it in the story of Paul, who struggled with his own demons, but ultimately found freedom in Christ. The biblical concept of generational curses is complex and multifaceted. It's not just about the negative patterns that get passed down from one generation to the next. It's also about the power of God to break those patterns and to redeem our families from the curse. As we delve deeper into the biblical origins of generational curses, we begin to see a pattern emerge. We see that these curses are often tied to idolatry, to a lack of faith, and to a rejection of God's sovereignty. We see that they're often accompanied by a sense of shame, guilt, and anxiety as people struggle to break free from the patterns of their past. But we also see hope. We see the promise of redemption, the promise of forgiveness, and the promise of a new legacy. We see that God is not limited by our family's past, and that He can redeem even the most broken of families. One of the most significant insights I've gained in my study of generational curses is the importance of forgiveness. You see, when we're dealing with these patterns, it's easy to get stuck in a cycle of anger, resentment, and bitterness. We feel like we're victims, and that we have every right to be angry. But the truth is, forgiveness is the key to breaking free. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what's been done to us, or excusing the actions of our family members. It's about releasing the hold that those actions have on us. It's about letting go of the shame, the guilt, and the anxiety, and embracing the freedom that comes from forgiveness. When we forgive, we open ourselves up to the power of God to redeem our families. We create a space for Him to work, and for Him to bring healing and transformation to our lives. Now, I know that forgiveness is not easy. I know that it takes courage and it takes time, but I also know that it's worth it. I know that when we forgive, we open ourselves up to a life of freedom, peace, and joy. As we wrap up this section, I want to leave you with a challenge. I want to challenge you to take a step towards forgiveness today. It might be forgiving a family member or forgiving yourself. It might be forgiving God or forgiving the past. Whatever it is, I want to encourage you to take that step. Take the step towards forgiveness and watch how God begins to work in your life. Watch how He begins to break the cycles of pain and suffering, and how He begins to redeem your family from the curse. In conclusion, understanding generational curses is crucial to breaking free from their hold. By recognizing the patterns that have been passed down to us, and by seeking forgiveness and redemption, we can create a new legacy for our families. We can break the cycles of pain and suffering, and we can walk in the freedom and peace that comes from knowing God. Remember, you don't have to be bound by your family's past. You have the power to create a new future, one that's built on love, forgiveness, and redemption. If you're struggling with generational curses, I want to encourage you to share your story in the comments below. Let's create a community of people who are seeking healing and transformation, and who are willing to walk the journey of forgiveness and redemption together. And if you're looking for more resources on breaking free from negative patterns, be sure to check out my video on how to overcome anxiety and depression. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.